So for those of you who've been doing the 5-hour challenges, I looked at all of the results, and as long as you sent your survey in by Monday night, then you can go ahead and schedule a call with me. And you can just reach out to Excellence at Best from the Nest, and they'll go ahead and get that call scheduled. He'll check to make sure that that you had the survey in. If you're a Momentum student, then you didn't have to have it in by a certain time. Just go ahead and schedule a call with me as soon as that's done. If you are joining Momentum or you're planning on joining Momentum, we're having a special on our coaching right now, but this isn't a sales pitch. But if you are interested, I'm going to go ahead and put that just in the chat, just in case anybody is interested. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get started here on what I saw from the surveys, and really some of the common pressures. There were some commonalities. Some people, got great news that their business was doing better than they thought. Some people got news that is hard to take, but is ultimately good because it's going to help you make your business healthier. So here is the common pressures of the things that we've seen in our coaching, and also what came through in the surveys, and it did kind of match. One thing that we saw multiple people say was the issue of cash flow was a big issue. And so decreasing expenses so that you can, that's supposed to be for break even. So break even, or your economics of one unit was too high, then that is going to impact your cash. Inventory turn, margins, volume to get to your break even, all of those things are going to relate to cash flow. So if you have cash flow, I want you to look at your 5-hour challenge and start to look at, is it because your break even is higher than your velocity allows? If so, then what you really need to do, at least temporarily, is decrease the expenses, increase the ROI, which might mean that you need to spend more time sourcing. So some of the things that you want to look at, if you see that you're able to get to the velocity, but you have a lot of stale inventory, then that really indicates that there's something that needs to change in your sourcing. So we're going to talk about these different common pressures and how you can attack each one of them. So as we're going through this, I'm going to give you some examples, and then you can help put together, and then you can use that to help put together your own action plan on, for your sourcing. So we're going to have you pick 1 to 2 really important areas that you're going to focus on, and then you're going to start to flesh out everything that needs to be done in order to hit those goals. So remember, all of these things are really related to cash flow. Decreasing expenses, inventory turn, even increasing time efficiency, because that's going to allow you to get a better profit per hour. A lot of you have heard me say it over and over again. As an entrepreneur, the only time you can really get a raise is when you make yourself more efficient. So, we first need to make sure that your business is on healthy financial footing, and more sales. I was someplace, and somebody said sales solves everything. Well, sales doesn't really solve everything. It solves some of the things, but it doesn't solve everything. In order for you to have, if you have more sales and you increase your velocity, but you haven't done these numbers and you haven't seen that some of the things that you thought were profitable really aren't profitable when you consider how you're repricing them, or when you consider your the other costs of running your business, then you can grow your business really fast, but you can grow it into a negative. So make sure that you know which direction you're growing in before you start to speed up. And that was kind of, one of the things that we really talked about on that initial webinar that we did before the 5-hour challenge, on everything you need to know before you start to scale, or some of the main things. So when you're looking at tackling cash flow issues, you want to identify what inventory is generating both your gross revenue and your profitability. So you want to take down, to look at your top grossing SKUs and make sure that they're as profitable as you thought. So you can actually do that very simply. You can look at your top grossing SKUs easily from Amazon's reports. Profitability can be a little bit more difficult unless you're using something like Inventory Lab. If you're using Inventory Lab or something else that will kind of calculate your cost of goods and your profitability, then that's going to help you significantly. We want to make sure that the things that you think are making you money are really making you money. I can't even tell you the number of times where somebody thought that their private label was bringing in a majority of their income, but when they actually looked at where the profit was coming from, what sales were consistently generating the most revenue to the business outside of and when you take into account fees and pay-per-click, it was really their retail arbitrage. It was really their wholesale that was keeping their business afloat. But because they liked private label, they kept focusing on that when they really needed to be focusing on the part of their business that works, even if that's temporary, to get yourself out of a cash flow crisis. So you might have to say, well, I really want to move to wholesale and private label. I don't want to do retail arbitrage anymore. That's okay. But then what you might want to do is say, all right, well, first, in order, I need to get my business healthy and do what I need to do in order to get cash flow positive. So I might have to go back to retail arbitrage in order to really get the progress that I need. You're going to also, you also are probably going to need to cut expenses. Again, it can be temporary, but payroll is usually one area where people have a lot of bloat. The other is subscriptions. So, you need to be looking at those things. And like I said, you might have to go back to a less desirable sourcing thing. But remember, please, 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 before you take a loan, do one of, especially if you're trying to take a loan because you're trying to solve a cash flow problem, do one or both, either profit first, at least your inventory and operating expenses, and then a 13-week rolling cash flow. If you are doing, you don't want to do all of profit first, then just set up 2 bank accounts and have one, you have all your Amazon money come into your operating expense account. And so it would come into one account, and then you would transfer out the money minus what you need to pay in bills over to an inventory account. This way you're able to see. You can also, if you're doing a lot of credit cards to get points, then that's fine. Just designate, one card, that maybe doesn't get as good rewards. So that's going to be your operating expense. That's where Inventory Lab is going to charge all of that stuff. And then have your inventory on, one or a couple of other cards that are designated for inventory. That in itself will help you identify any problems right away, because ideally you want to be pulling some out for yourself, you want to be pulling some out for taxes, all of that good stuff. However, one of the things that you want to consider here as well is if you are doing this and is pulling at least the inventory and the operating expenses, as you're transferring that money to inventory, if you see that you only have $2,000 worth of inventory and you need to spend about $4,000 a week in order to break even, that's going to tell you that you need to change your sourcing methods, either increase the ROI in turn, or you need to lower your expenses. So even if you can't force yourself to do the 13-week rolling cash flow, which is more helpful, both of them are actually, I think both of them equal. I like the 13-week rolling cash flow because it tells me where we're going to be in several weeks. So it lets us know if there's something that we need to change before we get to the point where we're backed into a corner, or where maybe we don't have as much wiggle room as we would like. If you don't take a loan, you don't take a loan if you're don't take a loan to avoid dealing with cash flow. Like, this is just too overwhelming, I'm just going to take a loan and sales will fix it. That is how people end up filing bankruptcy. I would not recommend that you do that. More sales doesn't always make it better. Sometimes it can make it worse. So the other thing with loans, especially the large Amazon loans, is oftentimes people will loosen their criteria instead of raising it, and then that lowers their margins even further. So just some things to think about. I'm not saying that loans are bad or that you should never take a loan. I'm just saying you need to be very cautious about taking a loan in order to solve a cash flow problem. So how we're going to work on the action planning piece. I added that cash flow piece because that was like a lot of responses came back with that as a big deal in the survey. So how this will work is I will give you the option for each of the pressures. So this is, things that you can focus on and put into your action plan, and you can mix and match, or you can make up your own that are going to fit your needs. So there's going to be a temptation to just increase sales velocity and just focus on sourcing. And that is one of the things that I'm going to cover. However, if you have where you're not even hitting close to your break even, you don't have the capital to hit your break even, so even if you could source it, you wouldn't be able to, then trying to increase sales velocity is only going to put you further into a hole, because you're just going to get more and more cash strapped. So I know it's not sexy and it's not cool, but you need to make sure that you have your foundation solid before you really focus on accelerating your business. This is why we're doing this webinar and this series now and not in September, because now you have time to fix the foundation, get your business healthy so you can accelerate it for Q4. So if you really want to take advantage of Q4 and you feel like you're not where you want to be, this is something that's really, really important. You will need to fix things eventually. If you're having trouble with inventory, sourcing, cash flow, if you want to think about being an entrepreneur as being on a roller coaster, when your business is small, your roller coaster stays small. However, the bigger your business gets, the higher and the highs and lows can be, and the more scary they can be. So you want to think about that really as you're starting to, build all of this out. You want to make sure, more volume is only going to magnify any cracks or any leaks in your bucket. So you're basically saying, I'm going to increase the amount of water throwing through this bucket, but if there's a giant hole in your bucket, it's not going to actually yield you more on the net. It's just going to mean more work and more exhaustion and more burnout. Whoops. So what we're going to do, some of you have heard me talk about the book, The 4 Disciplines of Execution. Great book. When you first read it, it sounds like it just only applies to teams. And so I kind of just discarded it at first. I was like, oh, this doesn't apply to me because we don't have a big team. And I've had a lot of clients that have said the same thing, but it actually is really, really good for even if you're just looking at trying to maximize your own business, even if you only have one other VA that's working with you. There's a lot of things that really can make a big difference. So one of the things that we were going to recommend is that you have 1 to 2 wildly important goals. And then if you have a larger business, maybe you have several shoppers and several packers, so you basically have like a shipping department and a shopping department, then you're going to have them pick 1 to 2 wildly important goals too. And you can kind of suggest things, but you want them to actually pick the wildly important goals. So the wildly important goals must have a finish line. So it must be in the form of X to Y by when. So I'm going to give some examples of how you're going to do that. So now, when we set these wildly important goals, these are going to just be a very small segment of our day. So you're basically going to set aside 2 hours a day, 5 days a week or 3 days a week. If you're part-time, you might only spend, 3 hours a week on this. I would recommend that whenever possible that you maintain your business, continue doing what you're already doing, and then, you would add on an hour or two, a day, or at least, we'd like to see 5 to 10 hours per week that you're focusing on your wildly important goals specifically and not anything else. Now, when we talk about focusing on these wildly important goals, so we're not saying that all the day-to-day things are going to go away. You have to leave a good chunk of your day open for all of the things that are going to be kind of in the whirlwind of your business. Reimbursements that need to be made, an inauthentic claim, a store manager saying that they have this inventory and you're having to, change around your day to rush down to get it, or a wholesaler giving you an opportunity buy, or, not allowing you to reorder. All of those things are going to continue to happen in your business. So you have to give the good chunk of your day to fighting the whirlwind, answering emails, filing tax, all the things that need to happen, right? So we're not talking about stopping everything else in our business, but we're saying we want to have 1 or 2 areas where you're very focused on a fewer number of goals. So you're not focused trying to win all of these wars, but you try to focus in on a very narrow set of goals, and you maintain everything else, but you're focused in on trying to grow these two very specific things, one or two very specific things. And you're going to be working on meeting those objective milestones. So, in your schedule, you're going to give, a very small percentage of your day to working on your wildly important goals. And then you have to still maintain everything. I also have talked to a lot of people who want to move from one sourcing method to another. You don't want to go cold turkey. So you don't want to stop RA and start wholesale. It's going to mess up your cash flow even more. It's almost like, literally shifting gears. You kind of have to take your the pedal off the gas, and you need to shift and then move it back up. It should be like that, where you're tapering in and tapering out. So it should be like a gradient and not a line in the sand. So we want to have intense focus on fewer goals. So we want to leverage the brain's capacity to concentrate superbly on one wildly important goal at a time, while still being aware of other priorities. So you want to think about it as being like an air traffic controller. There could be hundreds of planes that are on the tarmac, but they're focused, even though they need to be aware of what's going on with the other planes. And if something is going on over there, they might have to, temporarily adjust and make sure that that attention that discrepancy gets attention for a second. But their job is to really focus in on that one plane, despite all of these other planes that are coming in and out and landing and taking off and requesting things. They're focused on making sure that the one plane that they're working on at that particular time gets off the ground or on the ground safely. And so that's what we want to do. Instead of trying to, pretend like everything else in your business doesn't exist, because that's just not going to work. And also not trying to do all things. So it's very difficult to try to grow your business and start selling on eBay and start wholesale and private label and do it all well. You really want to focus in on getting getting to a level of expertise in one area before rating it out into other areas. To defend against the whirlwind. So, all the things, so in order to kind of defend from, all of the craziness that happens in your day, kind of eating away at your time to focus on your wildly important goals, you want to spend about 80% of your time on dealing with the day-to-day stuff and 20% of the time working on your wildly important goals. And, some of you are going to say, well, I just don't want to have to deal with that. I want to get rid of all of that. It's never going to go away. You can work to eliminate it. You can work to get it to the point where you're not having as much and you have it optimized. But you're always going to have day-to-day things. No matter how big, no matter how small, there's always going to be things that are happening on a daily basis that are unexpected, that are just part of doing business. Now, in a traditional goal, you might say something like, my goal is to get more wholesale accounts, or my goal is to increase replens. My goal is to start utilizing PPC. With a wildly important goal, we're going to make a couple of distinctions. It has to go from A to B by when. So instead of, I want to get more wholesale, or I want to increase my replens, it might be to go from 100,000 to 150,000 in net profit by year end of 2020. To increase our number of wholesale lines with gross revenue of at least $2,000 per month and 50% or higher ROI from 3 to 10 accounts by June 12th. So it's very specific. It's like, here is where we are, here is where we're going, and here is when we will get to that point. Now, in order to really break out the actions that are required to set up your action plan, we need to make another distinction between lead versus lag actions. So it's kind of like if you have, a dad keeping score at a Little League game. The kid hits the bat, he runs around, he steps on the base. From the time he steps on the base, that's when he did the work. He made the score then, right? When his foot hit a home plate, the score was made. But it's going to take, the dad's got to take the hot dog out of his mouth. He's got to, put it down, and then he's got to push the button or flip over the sign to have the score reflect on the scoreboard. in our business, there's things that are like that, and those are going to be lag indicators. Now, lag indicators are really important because they tell us that the actions that we're taking, are they working and getting us the results that we want? So these are going to be things that maybe you don't have direct influence over, and there's not, it's not directly influenceable, and maybe there's a delay as well. So like when people set goals for, I want to increase my gross revenue by at least $1,000 per week. Well, the first 3 weeks, you're not going to see an increased revenue, even if you did all the right things, because your inventory has to get shipped, it has to arrive, it has to sell. You're not going to see that on the scoreboard for a couple weeks after. So if you are always basing your goals off of revenue, you're always going to feel a little schizophrenic in your business because, just about the time you feel like you're not getting anywhere with your goals, you start to get more, then your sales will increase because you've done all this work the previous 3 weeks, and you'll find yourself on a roller coaster up and down. Same thing with your total inventory at Amazon. Now, your total inventory at Amazon is a really important number for you to know. In order for you to have $50,000 in gross sales, the one thing that is non-negotiable that you have to have is $50,000 worth of inventory. So keeping track of how much inventory you have at Amazon and keeping that in relationship to your revenue. So saying, I know that on average I keep $50,000 worth of inventory and that generates $25,000 worth of sales. So if I was to, without loosening my criteria, if I was to increase the amount of inventory that I have at Amazon to double that, then hypothetically it would double my revenue, assuming that I don't loosen my criteria or start buying deeper. So one of the things that we recommend for sourcing would be to determine kind of the difference in where you want to go, like in how much you're spending now and how much you're spending later, and looking at how much inventory has been at Amazon, and you want that number to increase as we get closer to Q4, because you want to make sure you have enough inventory during Q4 in order to sustain the sales that you're looking to anticipate. But it does take time from the time you do the work and the sourcing and the prep. It doesn't show up on the scoreboard right away, and you don't have a direct influence over it because you're going to find inventory some days, you're not going to find inventories some days, the printer might break, and so you don't have direct influence over that. The number of wholesale clients that you have is also a lag indicator because you're going to be making a lot of calls, and you can't really control what number of companies will say yes to you in a given week. But so those are all lag indicators. The lead indicators, this is where we want to focus our action on. So this would be on how much you spend. You can control how much you spend. You can control how many calls you've made. You can control, the boxes shipped, or, really would be even more controllable is, when I buy items are shipped on average would be, 48 to 72 hours. So you can set up goals around that. So here's some examples. To move from 3 wholesale accounts, this is a wildly important goal, to move from 3 wholesale accounts with a minimum ROI of 60%, that I can order no more than 6 weeks of stock at a time from 3 to 6. I didn't word it very well, but I'm moving from 3 to 12 by January 29th. To go from spending $800 a week on retail arbitrage at 80% ROI or greater, not buying more than 15 days worth of stock at a time, to $5,000 per week by December 1st. So here's where we would put the lead indicators. So here's that same goal, the wholesale moving from 3 to 12 accounts, beating a certain criteria. And so the first week, you're going to just call, I would recommend that you focus on getting 100 qualified leads and calling them, and you're going to get numbers from that where you're going to say, okay, on average, if I call 100 qualified leads, then I get 20 price lists and I get 1 to 2 accounts. So I know that if I need to increase, I need to get 1 to 2 accounts every week. I need to get 2 accounts every week for the rest of the year. Then I know that if I place, if I focus on doing 200 qualified leads per week, then that should get me there. So we're going to focus the other lag. This is supposed to be lag. So this is the other lag indicators here. This is a lag indicator is, oh no, it would be lead. I'm sorry. I got a little distracted there. You would have 90% or more of my inventory following this buying criteria. So this would be the things that you're doing. So you're going to try to focus on making your inventory, 60% ROI or higher, because that was one of the criteria. You're going to focus on a minimum ASP of 25 or more, because you want to make sure that you're not looking at things, 60% ROI on a dollar item isn't going to cover the prep fees and the shipping fees. So it makes sure that, that 60% ROI is going to yield you something. One of the things about that best from the nest calculator is that if you are doing groceries or anything else that has a low average selling price or ASP, that, Amazon on items that are $10, they take a lot bigger percentage than on items that are $25, $30, about the size of a bread box and, normal weight. So, that's going to help make sure that your numbers stay on track. And then you're going to try to focus on buying the smallest amount possible and not getting emotionally tied in and making, large orders without seeing how they're actually going to sell through. And then your goals are going to also be, your lead actions are also going to be to process your price list within 24 hours of receipt, and to make sure that your replens get first dibs on my money, on your money. So the lag results would be we would be watching gross sales to increase by 20% after the first 3 weeks. That stale inventory stays at its current level. So you would look at, right now I'm at 47%. I'm going to be actively tightening up my criteria. So I'm going to be watching my stale inventory percentage, and I want that to stay the same or go lower, or I'm going to have to tighten up my criteria again. And that your average ROI, once things sell for your wholesale items, stays above 50%, which allows you to have some items that, are dogs, or that you had to reprice to move, or, some people came on the listing, but it still gives you enough room to be profitable. So you're going to be doing these evaluations on a monthly basis right here to make sure that taking these actions, making the leads, making, buys under this criteria, running the price list, all of these things are actually getting you the result that you want. So here is the one for retail arbitrage. So I'm going to spend at least 20 hours a week scanning until my goal has been hit. And then I'm going to spend at least 10 hours a week looking for potential replens, and that would be again until my goal has been hit. So you might have a certain amount earmarked every week for replens. Again, we want to make sure replens get our best first dibs at our money, because if you have something that's already proven to you that it's going to sell well at a consistent price, then you want to make sure that that's a sure deal. And so we want to stop emotionally sourcing and just putting anything in my cart that hits a certain buying criteria. And we want to make sure we're getting jaded and we're really focusing on the inventory that's going to give us the best yield for our money. And then we're going to focus on having items processed and shipped within 2 days. And here is the lag, so it's going to be basically the same. You could do the same lag results. I did them the same so you could kind of get an idea that, these are numbers that I think are important. So you could also look at your inventory at Amazon. You could look at, you could look at I think there's a couple other things, but those are these are the main ones that I think are most valuable. But you can look at your metrics and see, what it is that, is that getting you what you really want? You might even be looking at your profit and loss, those kinds of things. So some things before you begin to consider before you begin working on your action plan. One of the things that has come up in the surveys and in the calls is if you're considering paying off a loan early, one of the things that you want to consider is, will you have enough emergency cash that you're not going to have to borrow again? So you want to make sure that if you're paying off a loan early, that you have enough window and enough emergency cash that you're not going to put yourself right back in the same position in 3 to 6 months. Does your stale inventory look artificially low because of heavy repricing? So we had a couple people who were like, oh, my stale inventory is awesome, it's only 3%. Well, if it's that low, if it's 3%, we really like to see it anywhere between 60, 75. It can be a little bit on either way. It can be up to 80%. But if you have barely any stale inventory, that might mean that you're really heavily repricing or destroying items, and that is going to be masking your problem of your sourcing. So the stale inventory percentage really tells us if there's an issue with the items that we're sourcing. Do we need to change our sourcing criteria? So if you find yourself having to do heavy repricing quite often, then it could very well be that you're having an issue where you need to look at your sourcing criteria as well, and it's just not going to show up in your numbers because you're artificially lowering that sale inventory percentage by moving it through. So you could still have a sourcing issue that you need to take care of before focusing on accelerating. And then, do you need to take a step back to follow a winning strategy to start filling the hole that you're in? So this was a couple calls that I had yesterday where somebody was like, we've been trying to move into wholesale. We've been kind of struggling. They had just joined Momentum, so we're going to be working with them on that. But one of their wildly important goals is going to be focused on wholesale, and the other one is going to be good to go back to retail arbitrage, and so that they can, because they knew that they were doing really, really well with some retail arbitrage. Their numbers showed that they were consistent revenue producers. They were profitable. The profit per item was really good. So even though they didn't want to do retail arbitrage because they didn't want to be in the stores, in order to pay off some debt, in order to get them their cash flow set up so that it would be ready for Q4, so they'd have the funds available, they're going to really focus on ramping up that retail arbitrage to kind of fill in the gaps that they had from their business, and kind of get their business back on solid ground and then move forward from there. Now, we don't recommend that you take a loan to fix a cash flow issue. Again, we recommend that you do a 13-week cash flow report, or at least that those two accounts, inventory and operating expenses from Profit First. Make sure that you have enough cash to complete the plan. So if you're looking at you think that your business is healthy, you're not seeing that there's a stale inventory issue, you're not seeing that there's anything that's indicating that you have a sourcing issue, then before you build out your action plan to focus on accelerating volume, make sure you have the capital available to actually meet that goal. So as you're working this action plan through, and it says that on week 1 you're going to spend $4,000 and you only have $1,000 in the account, then that means we need to adjust the action plan to make it based in reality. Otherwise, every week you're just going to fall further and further behind. And you need to give yourself enough wiggle room in order to say, well, if I make a bad buy out of that first week, how am I going to recover from that? If you get too far behind in your action plan, sometimes it's better just to rewrite it and start over, rather than having every week be like, see, I still suck. See, I'm still not there. And that would, and focusing on that. So let's go ahead and talk about building in some of these pieces for the action plan. So one would be increasing volume. So you could use the calculator at bestfromthenest/calc. Again, remember that if you have a low ASP, these numbers are going to be a little off. Add your fixed expenses to your profit goal, how much you want to profit per month, and use your last 30 days average of ROI. And this is one of the reasons why I think Inventory Lab is so great. And I know it can be frustrating. It doesn't do everything we want it to do. But now that it connects to Be Cool, you can connect it to your repricer that way. It does your cost of goods, which saves a ton of accounting and bookkeeping fees. And you can use the SKU profitability to see what your average ROI is that we did on the 30-day challenge, or on this 5-hour challenge. I think that it will be worth it. You're going to use that gross sales number for your you put your profit goal and the ROI, and we'll spit out a gross sales number and what it's going to cost to spend. Now you're going to round that up. So if it says you need gross sales of $20,000 and you need to spend $5,000, round that up, and I would consider tripling or more the results. So if it says that in order to meet your mortgage payment and everything, it says that you need to get it 20 and 5, then you might want to say, well, my goal, I'm going to play for trying to get to 60, and I'm going to try to get to 60 and $1,000 in spend. There's a great book that talks about this concept specifically. If you're, readers are leaders, leaders are readers. But honestly, I don't always have time to sit down and read. But, when I'm traveling or I'm getting the kids, I will, instead of listening to the radio or listening to music, sometimes I'll listen to an Audible book. This one, 10X by Grant Cardone, is really, really good if you're trying to figure out how to finally get past, where you're always just a little bit short on your goals. So really, really good book, 10X by Grant Cardone. And so I would recommend at least round up, so you want to at least do, more than what it says, because it's a really rough estimate. And then you might want to consider making it even higher. And what Grant Cardone says is whatever you want your goal to be, you should actually set it 10 times higher. And then take the actions according to what the 10x result would be. By doing that, he says businesses don't fail because they were bad business ideas or was a bad product or the entrepreneur wasn't good at what they did. But most often, it's that businesses didn't allow enough time or enough money for them to get their idea go off the ground. So if you're taking the actions to produce 10 times the results, and then even if you fall dramatically short of that, even if your actions don't yield you even a small percentage of what you thought that they would, you're still going to be better off and above your base goal. Remember, if you're selling items with a low ASP, the calculator will be very off. So you might need to try to do those calculations manually. So here would be to create a plan for RAOA. So what I would do is I would say, okay, so if I know I need to go from spending 800 to 5,000, and I want to do that in 14 weeks, I took 5,000 minus 800, that's 42, and then I said, okay, so there's 13 weeks in here, so that's about $323. And so I always give myself a slow warm up on these goals. So I'm at, here, so what I did is I said, okay, so I'm going to round this up. So I did always start at the end and work my way back. So I was like, okay, so if I start with 400, so you can see I started doing 400 here. And then about here, I switched it to 300. And so then we had 300, 300, 300, and then there was just 50 left over. So this gives me 2 weeks to really get my stuff together and start moving. So we want to make sure that we're moving. Now, if you can see there it says that week's cost of goods. So I'm going to spend $800 plus I'm going to replace whatever I sold. So if I sold, $10,000 worth of merchandise, and I know that my cost of goods for that week was, $100, $2,000 or whatever, then I would add that together. Now, this doesn't need to be an exact science. We're going to be rounding it up anyway. So you can say, well, if I'm doing 25%, then this would be about this much. You can use your average ROI to figure out what this is. And I wouldn't expect any of the gross sales. So if I knew that I was doing 30,000 a month, I would do 30,000, 30,000, 30,000, 30,000, and then 30,000, 50. Now, obviously, this doesn't match a $30,000 seller, but I would take it, and I wouldn't plan on increasing until maybe the 4th or 5th week, because if I buy items here, they get shipped in this week, they get checked in at Amazon this week. This is the first week that they have a chance to sell, and we want to give it a little bit of leeway, so that would be why we start there. So we're not going to start the gross sales measurement a little further into it. Now, with wholesale, we would do something similar. So we're going to say, with our wholesale criteria, we want to make sure that each account, because we're going to be focusing on the number of accounts, but we have to make sure that the number of accounts is actually going to yield us the profit that we want. So each wholesale account has a minimum monthly revenue of $500. Now, I just made this number up. This is not like a guideline number. I literally pulled it out of thin air. So for some of you, it will be $200. For some of you, it'll be $10,000. I will tell you, and kudos to somebody. I don't know if he wants to be named or not, so I'm just not going to. But I got a message today from somebody who's like, I feel like it would be, he's like, what would you say that, would it be easier to get 50 accounts at, I think I might be messing up his numbers in the way he said it, but would it be easier to get 50 accounts at $1,000 a month, or 5 accounts at $10,000 a month, more than, would that be easier than getting 1 account at $50,000? As far as acquiring accounts and making sure that you're managing the inventory, I think it's going to be infinitely easier to get 50,000, or 5 $10,000 a month wholesale accounts versus trying to get 150,000, because that's going to be a much higher sales velocity. There's going to be a lot more competition. A lot of people are going to be focused in on it. So, I think that trying to go for smaller revenue numbers and helping them build that. And in Momentum, we're going to have a couple calls on kind of turning trash to treasure. What is it that we look at when we're looking at wholesale items and we want to increase the sales velocity on an item that we think has potential. So we're going to say that the lead action is to make 100 qualified leads, and we're going to do that the first week. And then after that, after we've done this, then we're going to have numbers to run off of. We're going to say, so for 100 companies, then I got 40 price lists, and from there I got 2 orders. So then we can say, all right, so if I know that I need to be placing 4 orders a month, then I need to start calling 400 companies. Now, if you're calling 400 companies a week, your average is going to get much better because you're going to get really, really good at it. So it's going to be horrible. Want to gouge your eyes out with spoons. Horrible for the first month. And then after that, it will get better. Now, if anybody actually can show me, you show me the records of, you calling and emailing up to 5 calls per company and emailing them, I would recommend a couple times, 100 companies, and you don't get 2 potential orders. You send me the price lists that you deemed were not good and the 100 companies, and I will go with you through a call with you to go find out what's going on. And, if you're in Momentum, then we can go through the process together where I can say, all right, show me how you're finding leads and what you're looking at as a qualified lead. And I can say, okay, so this is why I wouldn't do that one, or this is why we would do that. So if that's where you're at, then use those calls if that's where you want to focus. But out of 100 qualified leads, you should be able to get at least 1 account. That's like a minimum. So this would be the wholesale plan. So you're going to be looking at the number of leads contacted. So you're going to contact 100 leads, you're going to get a new order, and we're going to say that the first week, you do all right, and then you're getting better as you're going. And then we're not going to place a reorder, because the reorders, if you're setting up wholesale goals and you're looking at number of accounts, I highly recommend that your big metric that you're really focused on is the number of accounts that you can reorder from that meet a certain criteria, that generate this much per month, or that that are at least this ROI. Because anybody can place an initial order and anybody can open up accounts. I mean, I could open up 70 accounts in just a few hours at a trade show probably, or if with a team of VAs, we could have that done within a day, but I wouldn't have any orders necessarily. Opening an account is not a good metric. Anybody can open accounts. It's about finding profitable orders, and when you find something that sold well, that sold through it the way that you thought it would at your margins, and you're placing a reorder, that's when you're really starting to win in wholesale. But it is a long, hard road, and wholesale is not, it is very simple, but it takes a lot of diligence and persistence. So you have to be willing to see it through, and it's not fun the first 3 months. Now, it is great after that. Once you have your accounts, it's much, much better, but it takes time to get there. So with private label, you're not going to have maybe the same metrics. So you're going to have to get a little creative. So you want to set timelines for products. You want to say, okay, I'm going to bring these, my goal is to have this many. You could say, I'm going to focus on trying to do revenue, and then I'm going to be focusing on what generates the revenue. I think it might be easier, and with a couple of our private label clients that have come to do like the VIP day where they come, work with me for 2 days, a lot of them, we've ended up setting up a process more where it's like, I want to, by this time, I want to have this many private label products doing this amount of sales, and I'm only going to count them as a successful private label product if they meet these metrics. So assuming like a 30%, or assuming a 60% fail rate or 50% fail rate, depending on how confident they have and the niche that they have developed, then what we'll do is say, okay, then that means I need to have X many products in the pipeline, and so their goals are going to be on a kind of like a point system. So I called the vendor, I did this, I hit this milestone, and they work at a point system. It's a little bit more fuzzy, so you have to really work out the plan to get it objective. You don't want it to be like, I feel like we're making good progress. It needs to be like, I looked and we have 27 points and I said I should be at 30 points, or I looked and I wanted to have at least 2 products in phase 1, 2 products in phase 2, and 2 products in phase 3 of this project of getting these items developed and launched. And they are or they are not in those phases. And if they're not, then that indicates that a problem, or I haven't been focusing on executing my action plan. So that was for increasing velocity. So that's the fun part, right? So if you know that you can't do that until you lower your expenses, so your economics of 1 unit was high, your break even was too high, then you need to commit to cutting a certain amount by this date. You need to find somebody that will hold you accountable, and somebody who is scary honest. So there are probably 4 people in the community that I feel like, they have no desire to please me. They would tell me if I was trying to, work something out. Like as much as Cindy's an accountability, Cindy Thomason from Bookskeep is an accountability partner for me in my business. If I really needed to cut something hard, I probably would ask, say, hey, Brett, can you make sure I get this done? And I might ask him, somebody that I know is not afraid to be very straight. So if you're looking at the personality metric, this is going to be somebody who's a high D. You don't need to share your entire profit and loss, just your expenses, and go with them, go through like what things you should cut. If you're a momentum student, again, I will do this for you on your calls. I won't do it for you, I'll do it with you. So we can look. Now, unfortunately, sometimes that means cutting payroll. And especially if you've hired family, that can be very, very difficult. But even if it's a temporary thing, sometimes you do have to cut that payroll, whether it's either your payroll or your family's payroll, something, because otherwise you're just not going to make it. I know that's kind of oh no, PowerPoint crashed again. All right, hold on. Just give me a second here. It just takes a second to reload. Is this helpful so far as we're waiting for this to reload? All right. Okay. Okay, good. People are saying it's helpful. Good. All right, so Zoom must have made an upgrade, or PowerPoint made an upgrade, and because they've been crashing nonstop the last couple days. So I'm going to look into that. So when you're going through the list of cutting your expenses, and again, you need to have somebody who's scary, somebody that you don't want to disappoint, and that you would call your BS. So you need to have somebody that you're a little bit afraid of. Somebody that you feel embarrassed a little bit, like not like embarrassed, like mortified, but you feel a little sheepish, asking. Somebody that you respect enough that, you will follow through. Now, as you're going through the list of things to cut, here's some of the main areas. Sometimes it's payroll. And again, payroll is really difficult. But if you don't cut the payroll and you're losing money every month, it is just a matter of time before everything collapses. So if you don't do this, it just is going to make the difference between you getting out of this business, or you having to make an uncomfortable decision and do work maybe you don't want to do for a couple months, and you going bankrupt, or you ending up in $100,000 in debt because you just kept borrowing to make it better. So I know that this is not comfortable and it is not fun, but if you're break even and you're economic of 1 unit, and if you didn't do the 5-hour challenge, go through the initial webinar at bestfromthenest.com/scale. Go through that and the 5-hour challenge, and you'll see what it is. And it's a very helpful number. Now, sometimes it's subscriptions, especially if, there's like maybe, and this is not to pick on tactical arbitrage at all, because it could be the academy, right? But let's say you got a great deal at, with tactical arbitrage, and you started out and you have a, great rate. And so instead of, 99, you're paying 69, and, you don't want to lose that. Well, if you are so what happens, that every month that you're not using it, you're losing money. So if you can cut, if you can cut $500 subscriptions, that is, that's $6,000 a year. So that's, really nice vacation you could have taken your family on. That is, so we do this several times. I know that it's time for me to do it again because I see charges going through. Oh, I need to cancel that. Oh, I need to cancel that. And so what I'll do is I'll take 2 4-hour blocks in my schedule. I'll block it out so I don't have any other coaching calls. And what I'll do is we'll go through, and on the first hour, I'm going to go through, and then I give myself lots of time because some services are really easy to cancel. They make it, very upfront, and some people are going to make you run around in the dark to try to get things removed. So, and then keep note of that. If somebody makes it really, really hard for you to cancel, the exception is like if you've made like a long-term commitment. So, if I had somebody we were in the same mastermind, and she didn't use the coaching calls, but she wanted to get, she hadn't given the coach the opportunity to help make a difference, but she wasn't getting results because she wasn't participating in the program. That can be a little different. Now, again, it's, sometimes it's debt service. So this is where people get stuck the most. You've borrowed, you've made a couple decisions, you made bad decisions, and you borrowed a little more, and you made some good decisions and some bad decisions. And so what where you're really at now is the debt service is putting so much strain on you. If that's the case, you need to cut expenses down to the bare bones, and you're going to have to plan on working 8 times as hard for the next 6 months. Focus on getting out of it before Q4. Try to build your action plan around that. Now you're going to have to raise your strength. You're going to have to tighten your sourcing criteria, and you're going to have to really watch your inventory turn. So you need to widen out and shallow out your inventory. So no more buying 27 Black Flyknit Nikes. You buy 2, you buy 3. Even if you're missing out on some things, you buy really shallow, you don't take big gambles, and you focus on building it back. And you're gonna, even if it's, something where it takes a little bit more labor, you're gonna do that. Whatever is working for you, you're going to double down on what's working. And once you get the debt service paid off, and you will get it paid off, I've been there where it felt so overwhelming, like it was just going to crush my soul, like so heavy. And because we just made a bad decision, and it doesn't mean anything about you. It means you made a bad decision. Doesn't mean that you're not a good entrepreneur. Doesn't mean that you're not going to make it. It just means you made a bad decision, which everybody does. Okay? So your bank account balance does not indicate your self-worth. So if you're in a situation where the debt service is killing you, you need to take a step back, even if it's not something that you love as much. You need to go back to what's winning and what's working, and focus on those things. And you need to focus on, you're going to have to spend more time sourcing with a tighter criteria and focusing on trying to get more yield, more bang out of your buck. So if your issue was your margins, your ROI, and again, remember margins so margins and ROI are not the same thing. So they are very different. So you want to make sure that when you're talking to somebody else, if they use margin and ROI are very different. And then you want to, if maybe your profit per unit, you're like, wow, I'm only, I'm doing 30,000 a month in gross revenue, but my profit per unit is only $1. Then that's not great, right? So then you're going to say these are some things that you could, some criteria that you could put into your action plan. To source items with only a 70% ROI or higher. Now that number, again, 70% is made up. So if you were at 40, maybe you move it to 55. You just increase it slowly. And if you're moving into wholesale, and I know that I say 60% is where we like you to be. If you can't do that on the first couple of accounts, then that's okay. It's okay to do 40, 55. I would not recommend you do under 40, just not give you enough wiggle room unless you have a really high volume. But what I would say is, that you would want to kind of focus on those You want to focus on raising it up a little bit and do it over time. Otherwise, it's going to feel like you just poured ice water over your business. It's going to shock the system too much. You can say, I'm not going to buy more than X, like 10, 15 of any one unit, because if you're having to heavily reprice, it could be because you're buying too deep. And then you want to make sure that restock items are always going to get your money before like RA clearance. So again, replens should always get your best first cash. You're going to track your average ROI and your spend per hour by store if you're doing RA. And then you want to really, if you're doing wholesale, you're going to be tracking things like the number of calls that you make, you know, the ROI, or the ROI, the minimum revenue that you're going to get from each of these accounts. So you want to have something that you're measuring on each one. So if your problem is inventory turn or inventory performance index, so or, and again, it could be that you know that you have a problem with your inventory turn, but it's not showing up in the numbers because you are repricing so fast. Then you still need to put this into your action plan. And again, we're picking 1 to 2 items. So you don't do all of this. You might say, well, I'm going to focus on increasing my inventory turn and starting wholesale, or I'm going to focus on decreasing expenses. I'm going to do that the first week, and then after that, I'm going to take that goal and I'm going to take the time that take that, and then I'm going to do wholesale after that. So you want to really focus in on what's going to get you the best yield. Only doing certain things at a time, 1 to 2 things at a time. So if you're having inventory turns, it could be that you're buying too deep, you're buying too saturated, or you're buying at too high of a price, so you're not able to stay in the buy box because you bought it and it's not profitable to move it down. So that means that we need to tighten up your sourcing criteria, and then you need to create. If you know that it's just you have some bad decisions that you need to cycle out and that you've been getting better about. Oh my goodness gracious. So if you have inventory, I'm just going to keep talking as I restart it. If anybody has any friends at Zoom, you can tell them that we do not like whatever they did that makes this crash like this. So let's see here. So if you're looking at, so I thought I was going to be able to talk through it, but now I'm getting distracted by, yeah, I know there was, now it's telling me oh, it just crashed. Okay, there it goes. Okay. My goodness. All right. So if you know that everybody's going to have some items that are going to age. So part of that is having really clear repricing SOPs. SOPs are standard operating procedures. There's a whole section in the Academy where we talk about this, and repricing is a really important piece. So you might say that when I list things in Inventory Lab, I'm going to tell Be Cool to do this one repricing rule that I'm focused on staying within 1% of the buy box price, and it's going to be fairly loose. I want to see how things go, and then after 30 or 90 days, then anything that's been aged after that, and we're gonna tell that by looking at the reports, right? So looking at the aged inventory reports, like the inventory health report. So you could say anything that's been aged over 90 days, once a month I'm gonna pull that down, and I'm gonna do the inventory evaluation, just same thing that you did in the 5-hour challenge. Again, if you're Momentum, you can send the data to Nate and he'll turn it around for you. But you're gonna download everything that's been there over 90 days, and you're gonna put them in a more aggressive repricing strategy. So maybe this rule is, you want to be at the buy box price. You're going to match, non-featured merchants, so like you're going to make it more aggressive. And then price C is going to be kind of to dump through anything that's been there over 180 days. You're going to say, do I need to destroy it? Is there something else that I need to do to enhance the listing? And if you have a problem with your IPI, you need to make sure that you get that taken care of, because if your IPI is below 350 on both 6 weeks prior to the end of the quarter and at the end of the quarter, they will limit your storage at FBA. It will be a big deal. So you want to make sure that you are watching that. The easiest way to do this is to make sure that you're selling through consistently, and it's by really managing that inventory turn. So getting rid of excess inventory, and then watching and taking care of any stranded or listing error inventory, because that's going to be inventory that's not available for sale, so it's going to hurt your sell-through rate. If you're looking to try to raise it, sometimes we've been talking to some people, it's kind of a drastic measure, but maybe getting some items that they can sell at a break even, that will sell very quickly to increase their sell-through percentage. So if time is your biggest issue. So I just got off the phone with somebody who was talking about how, her business is very healthy, her cash flow is very healthy, she's doing awesome, but it's about time and about creating systems and following the systems. So do a work journal for 1 week, and I want you to, so like what you're doing, and this isn't like I went to the bathroom at 3:57. This is, I sourced from 9 to 11:30. I answered email from noon to 1, and so you're going to have an idea of, and then I want you to go back after a week and then circle the things that were revenue producing, and then because we want to make sure that most of your time is spent on revenue producing tasks. So for most of us, that's going to be very heavily focused on sourcing. If you have really great systems, you might be doing more CEO stuff, and that's fine, as long as your revenue is meeting your break-even point, all of that. And so what you're going to do is you're going to do this journal for a week, and then you're going to look at it, and you're going to have to consciously let some balls drop. So you're going to say, these are the things that I'm not doing. I'm not going to focus on getting my eBay returns listed on eBay. I'm not going to focus on trying to sell on Walmart. I'm going to let all of those things go, and I'm going to really focus on increasing the sourcing, because that's what makes the biggest impact in my revenue, and that's where I really need to focus. And then you're going to start putting the systems in. Once you start putting your systems in, it's going to make you feel like you're moving backwards. You're going to feel like you're more stressed for time as you're creating the systems, because you're having to slow down to write them or train other people on them. That is normal, and you are right. You are having to work twice as hard. Now, the best way for me to create SOPs, and again, SOPs are standard operating procedures. So it's basically like a best practice or instructions or how-tos, right? So you record yourself doing the task. So if it's a screen-related task, then I'd be like, so now I open up PowerPoint and I click File, Open, and then I go to this folder and I open it up, and then I go to slide 6, and so you're going to narrate it as you do it. Right? And if you're same thing as if it's in a store. So, you would just you can download an app called rev.com, and for $1 a minute. And there's also one, Temi. The transcription isn't as good because it's done by a computer, but Temi, T-E-M-I, is 10 cents per minute. Rev.com is $1 per minute, but it's done by real people. So you can just do an audio recording of you're saying, so now I'm going, I walk into the store, I usually start with the home decorating aisle, and I start by scanning the items. I'm looking in a Profit Bandit, and I'm seeing so you're going to actually narrate it out. Then you're going to have the instructions transcribed either through, I think there's one that's called Got Transcript or something, but I usually use rev.com or Temi, Temi.com, and then I use those instructions and then I try to actually do the process following those instructions. I make any changes for things that maybe got transcribed wrong, or now that I've seen it written down, I'm like, oh, this isn't, a lot of times I'll look at it and I'll say, like, this isn't really the most efficient way to do this. So kind of a bonus in there is to look and where can you cut off 30 seconds from this process. Once you've done that, you're able to follow the instructions, re-record the video, and now you can pass it off to a VA or employee. Sometimes I'll have a friend that's not Amazon, not part of the Amazon community, try to run a task for me, and I'll say, because if they can, with no Amazon experience, if the instructions are good enough for them to be able to do it, then that means the instructions are clear. So when it comes to hiring, because a lot of times that time and the systems are really going to go hand in hand with hiring. So you might make one of your wildly important goals to hire somebody and have them trained on these, have them trained on this process by this day, this process by this day, this process by this day, and then, give yourself some room in there. When you're looking to hire, you want to create the processes first, then post the job. and then you're going to interview and hire, and then you're going to work alongside them. So you want to over communicate, over supervise, and then they're going to work independently where you're going to spot check, and then you're going to move things on their own with weekly check-ins. Now sometimes I have to, I'll put somebody, I'll kind of let them go on their own, where I'm not supervising them as closely, and I have to kind of take it a step back because maybe I have a tendency to want to, let people run with things. So don't be afraid to take a step back if you have to. With systems, you want to create a timeline of what processes that you're going to create these processes for. When will you have them done by? When will you have them outsourced? And again, you're going, while you're doing all this, you're going to be kind of running double time to do everything that you normally would do and have this. But after, just like wholesale, after you can delay the gratification, it is worth it. So when we're looking at creating your action plan, you're going to set 1 to 2 wildly important goals. So you're going to look at the goal. And again, I'd highly recommend that you triple or 10x that goal, and then you're going to do the actions with accordance with that raised goal. You're going to brainstorm everything that needs to be done. And you want to be really clear on a couple of lead actions, things that you have direct influence over, and things that have a direct effect on towards the WIG. So something that's going to move you towards your goal, that has a direct impact on your wildly important goal, and that you have influence over. So I want you need to have some lead actions and some lag actions. And then you're going to brainstorm all the other things that have to be done. So I need to get business cards. I need to, schedule a call with Robin. I need to, do this. I need to do that. You're going to put all of that down, and you're going to list everything in a giant brainstorm. So like, if your child's life depended on you hitting this goal, what would you do in order to hit that goal? Because if if you needed $2,000, then sometimes $2,000 might be hard for some of you. That's like chump change, but especially before we started our business, that would have been $1 million. But when my kid needed it for medical expenses to get something done, I found that money. So pretend like there's more on the line, and say, okay, so if I my life depended on it, I wouldn't just make 100 calls, I'd make 250 calls. And you're going to put all of that in there, and then you're going to go back and put them in chronological order, and you're going to set out your dates. And assuming you're full-time, you're going to block out 2 hours a day on your calendar just to focus on your WIGs. If you're not full-time, it's going to be, you want it to be about 80-20. You still have to do everything else to keep running your business. So this is in addition to. Now, that seems more work, and it is, but that's how it works. So, and as you get these wildly important goals, move towards them, it's going to alleviate pressure in other areas. So I'm going to go ahead and start typing your questions, and then I am going to pull up I have an action plan template that we made for Momentum. I'm going to pull up here. Go ahead and type in any questions. Oops. Okay. And I'm just going to stop share on this and start share on the Momentum action plan. Great. So if you're in Momentum, you can just let me know and I'll send this to you. So this would be like to start wholesale from scratch. So you see, we basically wrote out everything that you would need to do in order to get things up. We kind of broke it up into phases. And so you would set your target date and your completion date. So you can get it. I'm just going to go through it slowly. So people who are replaying the video and trying to write it all down, go ahead and you're welcome to doing that. So you can just kind of pause it on the replay and get this information. And so you can kind of start doing, this is going to be kind of some of the things that you're going to do. Now, when I was looking at, those 100 calls, right? So you might say, well, 100 calls, that's a lot. So, if I need 180 leads, that means I need to call, if I'm doing, then that's 25 calls per week, which means per day, I'd be doing 6 calls. So if you can break it out like this, it becomes a lot easier. Here's some of the things that we look at for a quality wholesale account. Reorder is one that we really try to focus our VIP clients on. Revenue per month, we've had some people focus on gross margin, some people focused on ROI, profit per item, being over a certain amount, and then the profit per month or the minimum revenue can be also. So, goal is to have this with person's, like for this template, what we did is, their goal was to have 30 wholesale accounts by November 30th that met, had a 50% ROI, but they were going to do 35% for the first 3 months to get them moving. They had plenty of capital, so cash flow wasn't an issue, so we could be a little looser on the margins, and then she was going to get more jaded as she went. So the profit per item was going to be at least $5 per item, and she wanted to be able to have each wholesale account profit $500 per month. So, what we did is we said, okay, so let's say, you need 30 price lists in order to close 3, then that means we need to have, maybe we need to call 90, which means, and let's say that only half of them, we make the disqualification process. So that means 180 leads. How many calls per week is that? How many calls per day is that? And so, you could see that you could put 6 calls in a week or 6 calls in a day very easily into 2 hours. I mean, that's only 3 calls. You shouldn't be spending 20 minutes on these calls. So it makes it much more doable. Yes, Morris, there will be a replay, and then I will send you the action plan. If you don't get it from me tonight, please send me an email because my computer's been walking kind of wonky today. Tina asked, should the WIGs be revenue-based like your examples, or can they be task goals? So they can definitely be task goals as well. So you might say, so like, especially if you know that you need to increase the amount of time that you have sourcing, and a lot of right now you look at your work journal and you see that you're spending 10 hours a week on administrative stuff. So you might say, all right, so the first one thing I need to do is I need to outsource the reimbursements. And then if I didn't do that, and I could teach my VA to do, the reports that they have in the academy. So like that weekly dashboard in the academy will tell you, identify items that have more than 3 returns. It will have it will have look at your sponsored products. It will tell you if you have stranded inventory. So if you do, between the weekly dashboard and the inventory evaluation, you could have them basically pull all of the data for you so that you're spending less time on that. And so so some of the things that we've had, some of the people that have come to us to help them write their best practices in their SOPs. We've set it up, processes for, employees to handle the returns, or, like a process for the credit cards to be paid, so that, they weren't forgetting it. So at least it was in an existent system, so they were able to remember it all. And, some of them, it's just been like, okay, so I'm going to have, with the reimbursements, I'm going to have them run the reimbursement sheet that's in the academy, and then I'm going to have them highlight the ones that they think that they're going to reimburse me for, or try to get reimbursed for. They're going to send me, the cases and then the text, and I'll approve them. And so all I'm doing is checking their work before they send it. And so, you don't have to outsource an entire process. You can outsource a section at a time. Any other questions? So you can see, like, so this would be very task oriented, right? So it'd be very so you're doing these tasks, and then you're also, and then the revenue is also, you're going to have both things that you're kind of working on. So sometimes you could do all revenue or all spend. Sometimes it's going to be more task related. With private label, it's definitely going to be very task related. So So if you did the 5-hour challenge and you sent the survey in before midnight on Monday, then you can schedule a call with me. If you need the link, you can email excellence at Best from the Nest. You're going to schedule it to just a 20-minute call, so you got to get straight to business. So make sure you have either, if we're doing Skype, then you have it ready to share on your screen, or you email it to me so we can go through it. If you can have your 5-hour challenge things ready for me to look at in case we need to look at those first, then that would be great too. If you have a question and you're hoping somebody else will ask it, then I don't think that's going to happen. So make sure I'm going to give people another minute or two to type. And so maybe what I'll do, I have a couple people that want the action plan. I'm just going to write down those names that are in Momentum. All right. So if you are interested in Momentum, you can go to bestfromthenest.com/WSRX. This isn't a sales pitch, though. I just think it's really valuable. Okay, Jim wants it as well. Great. Oh, and Tina. All the fun people. Okay. So if you guys have any questions, again, if your Momentum, even if you didn't have your 5-hour challenge done on time, then we can still go over it on your call. If you can finish it, it's going to help me quite a bit. Again, that promotion ends on Thursday. Oh, Brianna wants it too. Okay. And we will talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.